how did the three of you guys get together? How did you get connected and start working here in Second Life? I think Scott is going to answer this one.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Hey, first, before I get started, I'd like to say thank you to everybody at ISTE for having us here. This is just cool and fun, and I'm glad to be here with my partners, Cathy and John. Kevin, as I mentioned, at my last appearance on Eduverse Talks, I first came into Second Life just for kind of entertainment under another identity. And as I did that, I sort of learned to build and relate to others and have fun. I think that served me well. I'm glad I did that because it was kind of exploration driven and a way to build some basic skills and also to become aware of some of the pitfalls that can befall you in relationships and the like in Second Life. And I think that's either treated in the press in very negative ways or not talked about at all, both of which treatments I think are both unrealistic and unwise. One of the best treatments I've seen of that was in a voice thread that you put together, I think for K-12 online conference a couple of years ago, and you did several slides about that. So we ought to add that to our resources here. Anyway, I killed that avatar. I let him go, and I came in a very transparent way as Scott Merrick Oh, using my whole real name as my first name. And I came in dedicated to pursuing Second Life's value for teaching and learning, and through the relationships I could create right here at ISTE. That whole show, episode number 7, shows the power of those relationships and from 4 different perspectives in very good ways. And I'd recommend that to everybody. Long story short, to answer your question, I met a woman whose avatar name is fascinating. It's PadlurownCanoe Dibou. And I met her right here at ISTE, and she wrote me into what I think was maybe one of the largest and certainly one of the earliest multimedia events at ISTE Island. Paddle told me that her friend J.S. Vavoom was going to present in my own hometown here in Nashville. And so I wangled an invitation to that educational technology conference for community colleges in November 2007. Went down and met John and sort of facilitated the audio of that very early multimedia event here on ISTE Island. Then months later, we presided together over a Second Life Birds of a Feather session at Ep.8 in San Antonio. And we bonded there and sort of created MUVErs in order to incorporate so that we could have organizations deal with an entity and not an individual to kind of do what we want to do. And John and Cathy will share more about what it is we do.
That's excellent, Scott. So it sounds like you all came together almost randomly, and now are effectively working together with your own venture.
Totally, and I totally credit ISTE and Second Life because I would know neither of these fine friends without both of those entities.
Thanks, Scott. For our next question, we're going to look to Cathy. Cathy, we'd like you to describe your early experiences in Second Life and how you came to realize that much more powerful simulations were possible than what you were seeing in SL.
Well, I came into Second Life when I heard on National Public Radio that Kurt Vonnegut was here. And it was mind-blowing at the time to think I could sit in an audience, as you're doing right now, from my home in Arkansas, while Kurt Vonnegut was interviewed on the show Infinite Mind, and to have the opportunity to submit questions to him. And that was simply amazing. Next slide. My early involvement in SL, and the slide after that, please. My early involvement in SL was more of that of an explorer, hanging out with the outspoken, the outrageous, the outstanding, and the art, music, nonprofit, political scene, as well as SL corporate business developers and marketers. And I accepted the co-chair of the Hillary Clinton campaign and experienced one of the quickest and steepest learning curves of my life as I learned how to navigate and leverage Second Life in virtual worlds. And I learned how to community build, event plan and market, hire scripters and builders, give interviews, appear at online conferences, deal with griefing and with negative and positive press interviews and bloggers, harassed much like any public figure by individuals that had issues with the candidate or the campaign activities, while also being mindful that this was the new Wild West and not sure how legalities and federal election laws would apply to a virtual world U.S. campaign that had international interest and participation. And the next slide, please. It was this experience that taught me the power and possibilities of the SL platform to communicate and to educate, and the importance of regular events in an interactive and community design space. But it also made me very aware of the SL platform's limitations, in particular the skill education and the unique etiquette needed to be an active and contributing community member, and just the underutilized potential of the SL platform by educational and corporate endeavors with a regurgitation of real-life buildings that lack any true interactivity and a huge over-reliance on note cards and website links and PowerPoints to create an experience and to communicate.
Well, I remember meeting you at NEC. Actually, I think we met before NEC just recently, but I remember being so impressed with the demonstration that you did, which you'll be talking about a little bit later. Your passion for observing the possible really struck me at NEC, and how you were able just to say, we can do so much better. And then you did, which I think is the coolest part. The next question we're going to throw to John, which is, in your opinion, John, what are the hallmarks of an effective simulation for training purposes?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think there's several things that are important, and actually, they're not just for training purposes, for just general education purposes, whatever the discipline. But I tend to think interactivity, where students interact with something that's in a 3D environment. Of course, they can interact with different objects that are scripted and so forth. If it's a campus lab where you have high-fidelity computerized mannequins, they interact with that mannequin because they interact with people that they're going to take care of, in their job role. And so as registered nurses or whatever sort of training you're trying to do. So you're always interacting with people, so it makes sense that you interact as part of simulation training purposes. It also needs to be a real life simulation. It can't be something that's something that's very applicable to the job requirements. And of course, whether it's medical or something else, you have to have some real scenarios in there that would be very applicable in that job. Group involvement is very important. I think we don't work, kind of comes back to the interactivity too, but we don't work in isolation. We don't just go out and do our own thing and then hope everything works fine in any job or any sort of role in life. And so we need to have group involvement as possible. Critical thinking, I think, is very important, where you can take a series of different variables and try to digest those and come up with an action that would be appropriate. Because life is full of these kinds of variables, and you can't just say memorize this and then go out and do it. It doesn't work that well. Work that way. So you have to really have people looking at all the different subtleties and the variables, and then making a judgment. And a judgment, because of one variable, might be, the action might be quite different. Games, I think, are very important in learning, training or otherwise, and I try to include games in all sorts of very simple games, games that students can compete with other students, that they have fun and they enjoy it. And some of it's not necessarily the training that, specifically for the training, but it's to really engage the students. And then finally, students need to have fun, I think, in training. Otherwise, they won't do it. If they're not engaged, if they're not really enjoying the moment, then they're going to get bored. And they're going to see this as a training as a really a job that they don't really want to do.